So, Zhenya, just moving away from your identity as a pianist, I know because we've spoken many times about it and we've met there, you feel in many ways very Jewish. What do I mean? You have a strong attachment to Israel, but you also have a strong attachment to the Yiddish language, and which is a kind of language which was largely wiped out both by Hitler and by Stalin. You know, it's known, of course, that Hitler committed a genocide. Less known to the wider world is that Stalin killed a great number of Yiddish writers and poets. He targeted them as Yiddish.
The best one, the only one who escaped was Samuel Halkin, simply because he had a heart attack while in prison. That was the only reason why he escaped being executed.
I mean,
yes, Stalin closed all the Yiddish publications and cultural institutions. So he started, and then his successors continued the policy of ethnocide towards the Soviet Jews. Hitler carried out the policy of genocide against the Jews. Stalin and his successors, that of ethnocide.
I know that you've...
Yiddish speakers were allowed to speak Yiddish to each other, and my grandparents belonged to those. As a child, I used to spend summers with my maternal grandparents in their country house. That's where I heard them speak Yiddish a lot. Also, my aunt, my mother's cousin, who lived in the Ukraine, spoke Yiddish very well, and when she came to visit us, she would in Moscow, she would sing Yiddish songs. So when I grew up, I wanted to learn the Yiddish language properly, which I did.
And Zhenya, I know you've done more than just learn it. You've taken it almost as something as a what shall I say, not a crusade, you know, an aim of yours to help keep Yiddish alive after Hitler and Stalin did so much to try and wipe out this language and culture. And you even published a book of poems in Yiddish, I believe.
Of poems, short stories, and translations. Yes, it was published last year. I have it right here.
I see.
Here it is.
Very nice.
It's called A Jiddischer Schädel. Yes, first I started reciting Yiddish poetry in public, and then I felt an urge to write in Yiddish. First poetry, then prose. I befriended the leading Yiddish author now, Boris Sandler, who was also born and grew up in the Soviet Union, but not in Moscow, in Moldova, in Belz. There is even a famous Yiddish song about Belz, Mein Sterle Belz. And at the time when Boris was born and grew up there, the town still had a very large Jewish population. In fact, at that time in 1950s, the Jews still constituted the majority of Belz's population. They spoke Yiddish. Boris's first language was Yiddish. What's interesting, he started as a musician. He was a violin player. He played at the Kissin Philharmonic Orchestra, and he taught violin at the Kissin Music High School. But then, in his late 20s, he felt a desire to write fiction in Yiddish. And then he became a professional Yiddish writer. So I befriended him, and he became my literary mentor and editor. I started sending him my writings. He would edit them and publish them. At that time, he was the editor-in-chief of the oldest Yiddish newspaper in the world, Vorwärts, in New York.
Yes.
So he started publishing my writings there. And then first I started translating popular Russian songs into Yiddish, and then writing my own poetry. And then I started translating other things.
I believe, I grew up, as you know, in Britain, and our greatest writer, of course, is Shakespeare. And you told me in one of our past conversations that you even translated some of Hamlet into Yiddish.
Yes, taking it out of my mouth. I translated one night here in Prague, right in this room. Well, one night I couldn't fall asleep. I went out.
Would you like to read us? Do you want to read us just a few lines?
I went to this living room and started translating Hamlet's monologue.
Would you like to recite a few lines?
A few hours, absolutely, to do it. And I had it published in this book. Here it is. Hamlet's monologue. Zu sein, zu nicht zu sein, das ist die Kasche. Das Edler ist in dem Geist zu leiden, dem Besen Gorels stehen Warfers und Pfeilen, sie sich bewaffnen und entscheiden machen, a Sof zum Jampf und Zores. Deut a Schlof, nicht mehr und mit a Schlof, a Sof mir machen zum Harzweitig und tausender Naturklepp, was jarschend unser Guf. Sie sind der Greichen wert zu begehren, starben, schloffen, und verscholmen. Ot ist die Stern. In Deutschland, was Chaläumes kommen, wenn die behohle Sterbliche mir haben Marok geworfen. Ot ist die Machschowe, was macht Puronjes na so lang leben, weil wer wollt ausgestanden Petsch von Zeit, dem Umjöscher mit dem Unterdrücker, dem stolzen Manns Beleidigung, die Leiden von Liebe, Obgewärtigter Versammlung von dem Gesetz, die Chutzpe von der Macht, die Schätzung mit die Unwürdige, was nimmt die Würde auf von sei Savlonisch, wenn allein von Obzollen sein Herrschen mit der Kinschau. Wer ausstehen wollt, die Lasten zu schwitzen und rein mit den Kleben, wenn nur der Schreck von etwas noch deut. Dem nicht entdeckten Land, von wann kehrt kein Reisender sich nicht zurück, dem will nicht bringen in Verlegenheit und uns nicht machen besser ausleiden die Zores, was da mir oben, eider fliehen zu, die andere, was unbekannt uns seinen. Azoi Machschoves machen uns Pardonien. Azoi wird der entschlossen, Skalpolier blass, wie die bleiche Farben von Gedank. Und Unternehmungen, was seinen Fuhl mit wichtigen erhäubenen Kavones, die Stromen sehr bald auf der Seite verkehren, verlieren wir die Wert von dat.
Very good. For anyone who doesn't speak Yiddish and didn't understand, that was, of course, the famous to be or not to be monologue. Jenny, I just wanted to mention, there is a slight revival in Yiddish around. I even have a I Love Yiddish t-shirt here in Yiddish. And also, as you may have heard, Netflix has a show at the moment called Unorthodox about Khmer Jews. And what I want to say is it's largely in Yiddish, and it's become the #1 Netflix show in countries like Spain, where there are hardly any Jews, and the Jews that are from Spain are Sephardi, so they don't speak Yiddish anyway. So
but there is a Yiddish circle in Madrid.
Oh, yes?
I know its founders and its members.
Okay, so that's interesting. So I think that this is really, besides the fact
There are other Jews living in Madrid too.
There are some, well, look, my father, for example, also understood Yiddish from his father as a child growing up. But in London, in the East End, you know, before the Second World War, there was a Yiddish poets and plays and cultural scene. But of course, in Britain, outside of the ultra-Orthodox community, hardly anyone speaks Yiddish today in America or Britain. So I'm glad you're part of a kind of international...
Yes, no, in America they do. Maybe not so much in Britain, but in America there is a number of Yiddishists.
No, there are Yiddishists, but what I mean is that a couple of generations ago, half the Jews spoke Yiddish. Today, it's something of a rarity, unless you're an ultra-Orthodox Jew. Anyway,
as a community.
Sorry?
To be precise, as a community.
Yes, as a community.